Anna had always loved amusement parks. The thrill of the rides, the smell of popcorn and cotton candy, the sound of children laughing and screaming with delight, it all filled her with a sense of excitement and joy. So when her best friend Sarah suggested they spend the day at the theme park in the next town, Anna jumped at the chance. As they walked through the brightly colored entrance gates, Sarah excitedly pointed out all the different attractions they could try: the roller coasters, the haunted house, the bumper cars. Anna couldn't wait to get started. But as they wandered through the crowded park, something felt off. The air seemed to hum with an eerie energy, and the other park guests all seemed to be watching them with strange, knowing glances. Ignoring her unease, Anna and Sarah eventually found themselves standing in front of a seemingly innocent-looking carousel. The brightly painted horses bobbed up and down, the tinny music playing in the background. But as Anna approached the ride, a sudden wave of dizziness washed over her, causing her to stumble. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked, concern etching her voice. Anna nodded, trying to shake off the strange feeling. But as she stepped onto the carousel, she felt a sudden tug at her arm. Before she could react, she was yanked off her feet and dragged towards a hidden doorway behind the ride. Panic surged through her as she realized she was being taken against her will. She struggled and screamed, but whoever was pulling her along seemed to possess an otherworldly strength. Frantically, she looked back at Sarah, but her friend had disappeared into the throngs of people, oblivious to Anna's plight. Finally, they reached a dark, nondescript hallway, the air heavy with a sickly sweet scent. Anna's captor shoved her into a small room at the end of the corridor, slamming the door shut behind them. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light, Anna saw that she was not alone. A group of people, all dressed in dark robes and chanting in a language she didn't understand, surrounded her. In the center of the room, a circle of symbols had been drawn on the floor, pulsating with a malevolent energy. Terror gripped Anna as she realized she had been taken as part of some twisted ritual. Before she could protest, one of the robed figures stepped forward, a wicked grin on his face. "We have been waiting for you, child," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "You are the chosen one, the key to opening the gateway to the shadow dimension. Your blood will open the gate." Horror flooded through Anna as she realized the gravity of her situation. The robed figures advanced towards her, chanting louder and louder, their voices rising in a discordant cacophony. Desperate, she tried to escape, but the room seemed to swirl and shift around her, disorienting her further. In a last-ditch effort, she screamed for help, hoping against hope that someone, anyone, would come to her rescue. But her cries were lost to the ether, drowned out by the cruel chanting that filled the room. As the chanting reached a fever pitch, the symbols on the floor began to glow with an unholy light, casting eerie shadows across the faces of the robed figures. A deep, guttural voice echoed through the room, sending shivers down her spine. The ground beneath her trembled as a dark, swirling vortex began to form in the center of the circle. Anna's heart pounded in her chest as she realized the true extent of the danger she was in. With a final, desperate surge of strength, she lashed out at her captors, clawing and kicking with all her might. But it was too late. As the vortex grew larger and more powerful, a feeling of pure dread washed over her, freezing her in place. And then, with a deafening roar, the gateway to the shadow dimension was opened. A searing blast of energy swept through the room, engulfing everything in its path. The robed figures screamed in agony as they were consumed by the swirling darkness, their bodies writhing and contorting in unnatural ways. Anna tried to shield her eyes from the blinding light, but it was no use. The vortex pulled her towards it, dragging her closer and closer to the yawning maw of the churning supernatural gateway. Just as she felt her very soul being torn from her body, a sudden flash of light enveloped her, blinding her with its intensity. And then, as quickly as it had begun, the chaos and terror of the ritual vanished, leaving her standing alone in the now empty room. Shaking with fear and disbelief, Anna stumbled towards the door, her heart racing in her chest. She pushed it open and staggered into the hallway, desperate to escape the nightmare she had just lived through. But as she emerged into the bright sunlight of the amusement park, she realized that something was terribly wrong. The once bustling park was now eerily silent, devoid of any signs of life. The ride stood empty and abandoned, the colorful lights flickering and dim. Panic clawed at Anna's throat as she ran through the deserted park, searching for any sign of Sarah or the other park guests. But no matter where she looked, all she found was emptiness and silence. And then, as she rounded a corner, her blood ran cold. Standing before her, a twisted smile on his face, was the man who had dragged her into the ritual, only now his eyes glowed with an evil deep red light, and his skin seemed to ripple and shift like liquid shadow. "You may have escaped the gateway, Anna," he hissed, his voice filled with a dark glee, "but you will never escape me. You are mine now, forever." Anna's screams were carried away on an icy wind to never be heard again. And with that, he lunged towards her, his hands outstretched, ready to drag her back into the darkness from which she had barely escaped. Anna screamed, her heart pounding in her chest as she turned and ran, the man's laughter echoing in her ears. As she sprinted through the empty park, the shadows seemed to twist and writhe around her, whispering dark promises of pain and torment. And as she fled, a sinking realization settled in her heart. She had unknowingly unleashed a terror beyond comprehension, and now, no matter where she ran, there was no escaping the fate that awaited her in the darkness.